How could a plane many pilots called junk become one of the deadliest weapons in the Pacific War? How could a fighter dismissed as obsolete survive more than 200 combat missions and allow a single pilot to shoot down 296 enemy aircraft? And how did one man, flying a rugged, battered aircraft many thought belonged in the scrapyard, become the highest-scoring ace in aviation history? This is the story of Saburo Sakai, a fighter pilot of the Imperial Japanese Navy. It begins in December 1941, as Japan launched its sweeping offensive across the Pacific. At airfields scattered across Formosa, the Philippines, and the Dutch East Indies, sleek fighters of the Imperial Japanese Navy Air Service prepared for war. Their aircraft was the Mitsubishi A6M-0, lightweight, agile, long-ranged. To its enemies, it would become one of the most feared fighters of the early war. But to some pilots, even within Japan's own ranks, the Zero seemed fragile, poorly armored, easy to damage, a machine that could be unforgiving in combat. A plane some pilots quietly mocked as little more than flying scrap. Yet in the hands of one extraordinary aviator, it would become a legend. What happened next would become one of the most remarkable survival stories in aerial warfare. Saburo Sakai was born on August 25, 1916, in Saga Prefecture, Japan. He grew up in poverty. His family struggled to survive after the death of his father. As a young man, Sakai joined the Imperial Japanese Navy in 1933, hoping to build a future through military service. The training was brutal. Japanese naval aviation demanded near perfection. Cadets endured strict discipline, punishing physical drills, and relentless flight instruction. Out of dozens of candidates, only a handful would graduate. Sakai was among them. By the late 1930s, he was assigned to naval fighter units operating in China during the Second Sino-Japanese War. Here he first tasted combat, flying earlier fighters such as the Mitsubishi A5M. Claude, Sakai quickly developed a reputation for sharp eyesight and aggressive tactics. Dogfights over China were chaotic and dangerous. Enemy aircraft, often Soviet-supplied fighters flown by Chinese pilots, appeared suddenly from the clouds. Survival depended on speed, instinct, and relentless training. By 1941, Sakai had become one of Japan's most skilled naval aviators. That same year, the Imperial Japanese Navy began introducing a revolutionary fighter, the Mitsubishi A6M-20. Designed by Jiro Horikoshi, the aircraft emphasized maneuverability and range above all else. Its lightweight construction allowed it to outturn nearly every Allied fighter at the start of the war. But the design came with risks. The Zero lacked heavy armor. Its fuel tanks were not self-sealing. A single well-placed burst of enemy fire could ignite the aircraft. Some pilots worried that in a long war against industrial powers like the United States, such fragility would prove deadly. But for the moment, the Zero gave Japan a powerful advantage, and Sakai was about to take that advantage into battle. On December 8, 1941, December 7th in Hawaii, Japan launched its coordinated attacks across the Pacific. While American battleships burned at Pearl Harbor, Japanese forces surged south toward the Philippines, Malaya, and the Dutch East Indies. Sakai was assigned to the Tainan Air Group, one of the most elite fighter units in the Imperial Japanese Navy. The Tainan Group operated from airfields in Taiwan before moving to newly captured bases across Southeast Asia. Their mission was simple: gain complete control of the skies. By early 1942, the Tainan Air Group was operating from bases in the Philippines and later Borneo. The skies were filled with enemy aircraft. American P-40 Warhawks, P-36 Hawks, and B-17 Flying Fortress bombers attempted to slow Japan's advance. But the Zero had advantages. Its range exceeded 1,800 miles with drop tanks. Its maneuverability allowed skilled pilots like Sakai to dominate dogfights. In the first months of the war, Sakai began building an extraordinary combat record. On January 25, 1942, during operations over Balikpapan, Sakai encountered a formation of American fighters, escorting bombers. Within minutes, he maneuvered behind an enemy aircraft. A short burst from his two 20mm cannons and twin 7.7mm machine guns tore through the fighter's fuselage. The aircraft spiraled downward in flames. It was one of many victories to come. By spring 1942, Sakai's tally of victories had grown steadily. Japanese forces pushed toward New Guinea and the Solomon Islands. The Tainan Air Group relocated to forward bases near Rabaul, one of Japan's major strongholds in the South Pacific. Rabaul's airfields were constantly active. Fighters roared into the sky daily to intercept Allied bombers and protect Japanese shipping. Conditions were harsh: tropical heat, muddy runways, limited supplies. Aircraft often flew multiple combat sorties in a single day. Yet Sakai's Zero kept flying, mission after mission, dogfight after dogfight. By mid-1942, he had already flown over 100 combat missions. Each one carried the risk of death, and yet he survived. What happened next would test both pilot and aircraft beyond anything they had faced before. The defining moment of Sakai's career came on August 7, 1942. That morning, Allied forces launched the invasion of Guadalcanal in the Solomon Islands. American Marines stormed ashore to capture a partially completed Japanese airfield. The sudden attack shocked Japanese commanders. Within hours, aircraft from Rabaul were ordered south to strike the invasion fleet. Sakai and his fellow pilots of the Tainan Air Group scrambled into the sky. Their mission: intercept and destroy Allied aircraft protecting the landing forces. The distance to Guadalcanal was enormous, nearly 600 miles round trip. Even for the long-range Zero, the mission pushed the limits of endurance. The fighters flew south over endless ocean. Below them, the Pacific stretched to the horizon. Finally, the island appeared in the distance. Smoke rose from the shoreline as warships and landing craft fought for control, and waiting above the fleet were American fighters. Among them were Grumman F-4F Wildcats from U.S. Navy carriers. At 1400 hours, the sky erupted into chaos. Zeros and Wildcats twisted through the clouds. Machine guns rattled, cannons thundered. Sakai engaged enemy aircraft in a swirling dogfight. His Zero darted through the formation, maneuvering with deadly precision. He claimed several enemy aircraft during the engagement. But then something went terribly wrong. While attacking what he believed were enemy fighters, Sakai approached from behind. At the last moment, he realized the aircraft were actually U.S. Navy SBD Dauntless dive bombers, and their rear gunners were already aiming at him. A burst of .30 caliber machine gun fire struck Sakai's cockpit. The bullet slammed into the canopy and fuselage. One round smashed into his head. The impact was devastating. Blood filled his cockpit. His right eye was blinded. His left side went partially numb. For a moment, Sakai nearly lost consciousness. The controls slipped in his hands. His aircraft began to dive toward the sea. Most pilots would have been lost. A head wound, severe bleeding, hundreds of miles from base. Yet Sakai refused to surrender. Through sheer determination, he forced his damaged Zero back under control. The aircraft was barely responding. His vision was blurred. Blood streamed down his face and onto the instruments. But somehow, the Zero remained airborne. Sakai realized something extraordinary. Despite the damage, the aircraft was still flying. He turned north. The journey back to Rabaul would be nearly 5 hours. Over open ocean, alone. Every minute tested his strength. Pain throbbed through his skull. At times he considered deliberately crashing into an enemy ship rather than dying slowly. But discipline and duty kept him flying. He focused on the horizon. Hour after hour passed. The Zero's engine droned steadily. Against all odds, the aircraft carried him across hundreds of miles of Pacific Ocean. Finally, after nearly 5 hours in the air, the coastline of Rabaul appeared. Ground crews watched in disbelief as the battered fighter approached the runway. Its canopy shattered. Its pilot slumped forward in the cockpit. Sakai landed the aircraft successfully. Then he collapsed. Doctors rushed him to a hospital. His injuries were severe. A bullet had damaged his skull and destroyed vision in his right eye. Many believed his flying career was finished, but they underestimated Saburo Sakai. Sakai spent months recovering from his injuries. Despite permanent damage to one eye, he eventually returned to flight duty. Throughout the war, he continued flying missions for the Imperial Japanese Navy. By the end of the conflict in 1945, Sakai had flown more than 200 combat missions. His final tally of aerial victories reached 296 aircraft, according to Japanese wartime records. That number made him one of the highest-scoring fighter aces in history, but perhaps even more remarkable was his survival. Again and again, Sakai returned from missions that seemed impossible. Flying an aircraft many had once criticized as fragile or outdated, he demonstrated the power of skill, discipline, and sheer determination. After the war, Sakai lived a quiet life in Japan. He eventually shared his experiences through memoirs and interviews, offering rare insight into the life of a Japanese fighter pilot during the Pacific War. His story remains a powerful reminder of the human element in warfare. Behind every aircraft and every statistic was a pilot facing unimaginable danger. and sometimes, against overwhelming odds, surviving to tell the tale. This was just one of countless untold stories from the Second World War. Subscribe to our channel as we continue to bring these forgotten chapters of history back to life.